All right, so number 1, you've got, how many 2's do you have there? You've got 5. So if you are going to write that as using an exponent, that means your base is 2 and you're raising it to the 5th power. So you're just counting up however many 2's you have, and that is your exponent. Number 2, you are evaluating. So this is when I said you should have a number. If you're evaluating, you should have a single number not raised to an exponent. This is 7a cubed. So the a is what I'm cubing. I'm not cubing the 7 times a. So you have to cube a first and then multiply that by 7. So if a is 2, that means I've got 2 cubed, and I'm going to multiply that by 7. 2 cubed is 8, so 7 times 8 is 56. Okay. If that 7 and the a, if I had parentheses around that, that's when I would multiply the 7 and the a first. But since there are no parentheses, I've got to evaluate a cubed and then multiply that by 7. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Number 3, exactly like number 1. How many 3's do I have? 6. So that should be 3 to the 6th power. And number 4, exactly like number 2, I have to evaluate the y to the 4th first. So since y is 3, that means I've got 3 to the 4th times 5. 3 to the 4th is 81. So multiply that by 5 and your answer is 405. So you got to do those exponents first. All right, number 5 is a little tricky because you're factoring. Remember, factor means to break everything down as far as possible. Okay, so you've got to break it down into prime numbers. So I cannot leave this as 2 times 10 because 10 is not a prime number. You would have to break it down further. Or I couldn't leave it as 4 times 5 because 4 would need to be broken down into 2 and 2. Okay. So the only answer choice that's correct is A. Because C, you still get 20x squared y, but that 4 is not a prime number. You would have to break that 4 down farther. Same as D. You'd have to break that 10 down. Okay. As far as possible, yes. Your x squared, that means you've got 2 x's. Okay. So you're breaking it down as far as possible. Questions on that? Number 6, you are multiplying powers, so that means you're adding the exponents. So d to the 5th power. And number 7, you're breaking that apart. So you're going to look at your coefficients first, and then look at your variables. Okay. So 12 times 3 gives me 36. Now I look at my x terms. Do I have another x term in there?
No.
No, so I can't multiply it by anything. So that just stays the same, so I have x squared. And then I've got a y and a y. So what exponent is that y raised to? A 1. So that means I've got y to the first times y to the first. And what do you do when you multiply powers? You add their exponents. So your final answer should be 36x squared, y squared. So remember to break it apart in pieces. Look at your coefficients, and then look at your variables separately. And then put them all together in one. Okay. Questions on that? All right, number 8. When we're dividing powers, what do we do to those exponents? You subtract them. So negative 3 to the 3rd power. Okay. Remember, keep that negative 3. Just keep that base how it is. Okay. Don't change the base. And number 9, a to the 16th over a. That a is actually to a power of 1. So that means you've got a to the 16 minus 1. So a to the 15th. Yes?
On the test tomorrow, do you want to like show what like the negative 3?
It doesn't matter. It's going to be multiple choice. So there's not really going to be any partial credit. It'll all be right or wrong. We did number 9, didn't we? So number 10, you're just writing that using a negative exponent. So what do I do when I have 1 over a positive? How do I change that, Tyler? You take that bottom number and you just change that exponent to a negative. So 3 to the negative 9th power. Okay. Number 11, you're evaluating. So again, this is where I should have a number, not something to an exponent. So if I've got b to the negative 3rd and b is 5, that means I've got 5 to the negative 3rd power. But I don't want negative exponents, so I need to change that to have a positive. So I can put 1 over it, 1 over 5 to the 3rd. If you're evaluating, you're not leaving that in exponential form. You want to go ahead and do 5 to the 3rd. So that should be 1 over 25. Yes. What did I say? Sorry. 1 over 125. 3 to the negative 9. And number 12, you're changing that scientific notation into standard form. So if I've got 5.09 and my exponent is to the negative 4th power, that tells me I'm moving that decimal 4 places in which direction? To the left. It's a negative number, so I'm going to the left. So if I move it 4 places to the left, that means I've got to add 3 zeros. So 0.000509. Any questions on that first page? Any of those, 1 through 12? Okay. Number 13. So they're wanting you to write 635 billion in scientific notation. So first off, you got to write out 635 billion so you can see how many times you need to move that decimal. So this is my number with my decimal at the end. So how many times did I have to move it to put it in between the 6 and 3? 11 times. Since I started with a very large number, is that exponent going to be a positive 11 or a negative 11? A positive 11. You start with a large number, positive exponent. But if you start with a small number or decimal, it's going to be a negative exponent. So that should be 6.35 times 10 to the 11th. Remember, that decimal has to go in between the 6 and the 3. It can't go in between the 3 and the 5 because that number has to be between 1 and 10. Or greater than 1, less than 10. Okay. And number 14, that is mercury. Remember, you're just comparing the exponents. So 8 and 7, and they want to know, is Mars closer to which one? Mercury. So it's closer to Mercury because that's the smallest. 7 is smaller than 8. So Mercury would be closer to Mars. The larger one, that would mean the further apart they are. So you're looking for that smaller number. So that should be Mercury. Remember, what do I do if they were both 10 to the 7th and 10 to the 7th, if they have the same exponent? No. If they had the same exponent, how would I know which number was larger? What are you looking for? By the actual number, right? The 7.53 or whatever. Okay. So if your exponents aren't the same, you're comparing exponents. But if they are the same, that's when you're looking at the number, the factor.
It's stuffy. That's too warm.
Oh, it feels good in here. What is this? Is this prizes?
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Questions on 14? Good on that? Number 15 and 16, you're simplifying. So this is a power of a power. So what do I do when I have a power of a power? What do I do with the exponents? Multiply the exponents. So d to the 24th. And then number 16, I have a coefficient now. Yeah.
How do you know when to multiply?
If it's a power raised to another power, so an exponent raised to another exponent, that's when you multiply. But if you just had d to the 8th times d to the 3rd, that's when you add. So if it's a power of a power, you multiply. But if it's a power times a power, you add. Okay. Number 16, same thing, except for I've got a coefficient, so I've got to do that 3 cubed, and then multiply that by the v to the 4th to the 3rd, or 4 times 3, sorry. So 27v to the 12th. So you're breaking that apart again. Number 17. I gotta sneeze. You're breaking it apart. So this is exactly like, sorry, thank you. This is exactly like the one on the front that we did. You're breaking it completely apart. So you want to look at your coefficients first. I got another one coming. So 11 times 5 gives you 55. You've only got one, maybe not. You've only got one x term. So you can't do anything with that. So that stays x to the third. And then you got two y's. So y to the first times y to the first gives you y to the second. So 55 x cubed y squared. Good so far? Any questions? Number 18, when I have a quotient, so I'm dividing two powers, that's when I'm subtracting the exponent. So that should be negative 4 to the 5th power. And number 19, you're just expressing that with a negative exponent. So what would that be? 5 to the negative 6. Okay. Last one, that's like the one that we did on the front as well. B to the negative third, which would be 3 to the negative third, but you want to change that negative exponent to a positive. So 1 over 3 cubed, 1 over 27. Okay. Any questions on this study guide?
This should be all 100.
Should be. It's pretty easy. Okay, so this test is tomorrow. Put 55 x cubed y to the second. All right, guys, listen up real quick before you start packing up.